Good afternoon. Welcome to the third Bureau of Business Research webinar of the 2022 Spring Series. Today we will be looking at the results of the study, the economic impact of Nebraska military assets, an update for fiscal year 2020. This is a study that was completed through a collaboration between the UNL Bureau of Business Research and the Nebraska Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs. Today's presentation is sponsored by the Bureau of Business Research within the Department of Economics at the College of Business. My name is Mitchel Herian. I serve as Project Director at the Bureau of Business Research here at UNL. Today I'm joined by Phil O'Donnell, who serves as the Military Affairs Liaison with the Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs. Dr. Eric Thompson, the Director of the Bureau of Business Research, was a co-author on the report, but will not be joining us today. Before we begin, I would like to point out several features of the webinar. As you can see, we'll be using Zoom and PowerPoint presentations to communicate the results of our study today. One feature of the webinar is a chat window where you can chat with other participants at any time. We also have a question and answer window where you can type in any questions that you might have for Phil or I. We look forward to any questions that you might have, and you can type in your question at any time. However, we will answer those questions at the end of the presentation after all information's been presented. I will now turn the presentation over to Phil O'Donnell, who will provide an overview of the Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs and briefly describe the purpose of the report. Phil?
Hey, thank you, Mitch, and thanks to all the attendees in the audience today. I really appreciate your active interest in military and veterans affairs in Nebraska, and I see a lot of familiar names in the attendee list. Established in 2016, the 11-member commission strives to preserve and protect military installations across the state, attract new missions to these military installations, and serve Nebraska's military and veteran families. Voting members of the commission include the Director of Nebraska's Department of Economic Development, the Adjutant General of Nebraska's National Guard, the Director of the Nebraska Department of Veterans Affairs, and 3 appointed members from each of Nebraska's 3 congressional districts. Ex officio non-voting members of the commission include the Veterans Program Coordinator with the Nebraska Department of Labor, the Chair of the State Committee of Nebraska's Employer Supportive Guard and Reserve Organization, the Commander of the 55th Wing, the Commander of the 557th Wing, and the Commander of the United States Strategic Command, who are all located at Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. The key deliverable of the commission is its annual report to the governor and the legislature. Now let's move to the next slide and talk about the annual report. In 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2021, the commission contracted with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Bureau of Business Research to assess the economic impact of Nebraska's military assets. In addition to the economic impact, the annual report includes a summary of military assets in Nebraska and commission recommendations to the governor and the legislature. Please know that we just recently posted the entire report on the commission's website, which is available on veterans.nebraska.gov. There you will find not only this year's report, but prior year's report, along with more information about the Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs. The aim of this slide is to simply illustrate the presence of military and veterans affairs facilities located throughout the state. And these facilities range from Offutt Air Force Base, an active duty base, National Guard readiness centers throughout the state, reserve centers throughout the state, and federal and state veterans affairs facilities. With that, I'll turn it over to Mitch.
Okay, I had to unmute myself. Thank you, Phil. As the title of the report suggests, and as Phil mentioned, the heart of the analysis is the economic impact estimate of military assets and spending in the state. Many of you may be familiar with the report from previous years or this year's report, but we typically look at 5 separate spending flows, federal dollars coming into the state. The first of those you see on this slide here, I'll briefly mention all 5, then we'll drill down on this slide a little bit. Those 5 spending flows are DOD spending, so this includes active duty, Guard, and Reserve installations throughout the state. DOD retiree and pension payments that go to military retirees in Nebraska. VA spending, federal VA spending that comes to the state. Corps of Engineer dollars that flow to Nebraska for operations. And GI Bill spending that support education. Here on this slide, we see the various DOD spending flows in addition to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So the top row presents the information related to Offutt Air Force Base and STRATCOM. These are the direct personnel and spending figures derived from reports we've received from Offutt Air Force Base. So you can see in fiscal year 2020, over 8,800 individuals were employed at Offutt Air Force Base with $1.375 billion in spending. Nebraska National Guard units throughout the state support 3,459 employees with $241.8 million in spending. Reserve components throughout the state have nearly 2,000 employees with about $58 million in spending. And U.S. Army Corps of Engineers with a headquarters in Omaha and operations in various locations in greater Nebraska have about 700, just over 700 employees with $58.9 million in spending. Just to give you an idea of how these numbers match up to previous years, the Offutt and STRATCOM numbers are up just a little bit from fiscal year 2019. Nebraska National Guard numbers are down slightly in terms of personnel and spending. Reserve numbers are pretty similar to what we've seen in previous years. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers numbers are down just slightly from what we've seen in previous years, though this is likely due, there has been a lag in the data we've received from the Corps of Engineers, or the sources we've used to derive that information. So the last 2 years, I believe, we used fiscal year 2018 numbers. This year we got a refresh in data just showing that there's a slight reduction in personnel and spending for Corps of Engineers. The next spending flow that we focus on in the report is the Department of Defense military spending. These numbers are derived from the DOD Office of the Actuary. Again, these are dollars that come to Nebraskans who have separated from the military, retired from the military, and are eligible for pension and retirement payments. So you can see in fiscal year 2020, there were 13,603 retirees receiving compensation in Nebraska. In total, the payments totaled $33.1 million per month. We annualize this to show that retirees are receiving about $400 million per year in the state of Nebraska. And not too surprising if you look across the various branches of service that are presented here. Air Force retirees comprise the greatest number of that 13,603, which is not too surprising given the presence of Offutt Air Force Base. The next major type of spending we focus on is federal VA spending in the state. So these numbers are obtained from the U.S. VA. And you can see these totals are split out across 6 different categories. So a total of $1.5 billion were spent in Nebraska by the VA in fiscal year 2020. The largest components of spending were compensation and pension payments and medical care payments. I would point out that this $1.5 billion is an increase of about $200 million from fiscal year 2019. It appears that this $200 million increase was largely driven by increases in medical care, spending on medical care, and increases in spending on compensation and pension payments. Just to give everyone an idea of how these dollars are distributed throughout Nebraska geographically, This map shows how just the raw number of dollars in millions by county in the state. Not surprisingly, Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster County are seeing the greatest levels of spending given their populations. So because the spending that we're going to see on Veterans Affairs is going to be driven by population to a large extent, the total absolute values, we sought to understand how dollars might be distributed in a more standardized way. So what you're looking at here is VA spending per veteran by county in Nebraska. So for each county, we'll look at that total number, that total dollar figure, divide that by the number of veterans in that county, and that's how we get the number you're looking at here. And darker colors on this graph, on this map, indicate higher levels of spending. So you can see the darker colors are really distributed throughout central Nebraska, south central, and western Nebraska. So on a per veteran basis, we are seeing those dollars distributed more evenly across the state than if we were just to show that the previous map here, where those dollars are really concentrated around the population centers. Phil, maybe you can provide some input on why we may be seeing these darker colors or these greater average levels of spending in greater Nebraska.
Sure, a great observation, Mitch. I appreciate that. And again, the aim of this map is to quantify VA spending per veteran by county across Nebraska, and arguably it it illustrates the important work of the county veteran service officers, the veteran service organizations, and the Nebraska Department of Affairs state service officers. So their important work leads to this spending across the state in their respective counties. So thanks,
Okay.
Mitch.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. So those are 5 different types of spending that we really focus on in the report. And again, what we just reviewed, those are the direct levels of spending and employment in the state that are associated with those spending levels. So to generate an economic impact estimate, so looking at the impact that those dollars have on the state economy as they flow into the state of Nebraska, we use Implan. It's a software, an industry standard software for estimating that economic impact. So what happens in general is you take those direct spending figures, you plug those into the software, and it gives you estimates on indirect spending. So this is the business activity associated with that original spending. So as Offutt Air Force Base, for example, contracts out for services and goods to support their operations, that can be thought of as that indirect spending. In addition to that indirect spending, we have induced spending, so induced dollars. So this occurs, or these dollars are realized as, again, as Offutt Air Force Base, for example, contracts out for goods and services. Well, the employees working at those businesses who provide those goods and services go out and spend their paychecks in the economy. We can think of those as induced dollars. What you're seeing here are those 3 different types of dollars added up for a total impact across each of these 5 spending flows. So military bases and installations, again, this is Offutt, Stratcom, Guard, and Reserve components throughout the state. So we're seeing a $2.5 billion impact for these installations, supporting 23,455 jobs and about $1.4 billion of salary associated with those jobs. The retirement and pension distributions that we reviewed a moment ago have a $411 million impact on the state, supporting nearly 2,700 jobs and about $130 million of salary. VA spending has a very large impact on the state with $2.2 billion, supporting nearly 17,000 jobs and nearly $1 billion of salary associated with those jobs. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers spending, an impact of $144 million, supporting about 1,200 jobs. and GI Bill spending about a $34 million impact, supporting just under 700 jobs. Typically, we do not combine these various spending flows to get one big economic impact estimate for the state. We just feel that the nature of these spending flows are distinct enough that we want to keep those separate in the report when we're presenting this information. Nonetheless, if you do tally up those columns, you can see a combined impact of $5.3 billion, including about $2.5 billion in labor income, supporting nearly 45,000 jobs in the state. So large numbers that we've seen with previous reports in previous years. Each year, we are asked here at the BBR, when we work with the commission, we are asked to conduct several what we call special studies. So these are topics of interest to the commission that we are asked to pursue, drill down on, and provide information back to the commission in our report. One of the special topics this past year with the fiscal year 2020 data was to look at what we call in the report supply chain analysis. Really what we're looking at is federal contracting here in Nebraska. So we wanted to understand how businesses work with the federal government here in Nebraska. We've specifically focused on contracts held by Nebraska businesses or contracts held where Nebraska is the primary place of performance on a contract. We're looking at those contracts with the Department of Defense and the VA. I would point out that there are organizations here in the state that may do business with either the Department of Defense or the VA or both those entities, and they may also do work with the Department of Homeland Security, for example. But we did not include those Department of Homeland Security contracts just to be consistent with the rest of the focus of this report. So just, again, these are contracts where Nebraska is the place of performance in fiscal year 2020, where DOD is the awardee and the VA or VA is the awardee. Okay. So what we'll see with this map, so again, this is not too surprising that we're seeing larger amounts of spending or contracts held by businesses in the more populous counties of the state. So Sarpy County is the darkest county on this map. Again, not surprising with the location of Offutt Air Force Base and STRATCOM there. Douglas County and its close proximity to Offutt and STRATCOM. Again, we see large dollar figures worth of contracts held by businesses in Douglas County. In Lancaster County is it's kind of hard to see, but also has fairly large numbers. Just to give you a sense of what you're looking at here. So in fiscal year 2020, there were about $1 billion of federal contracts held by businesses here in the state. So a fairly large number. And thinking back to the numbers we just reviewed related to the operations spent, the spending dollars at Offutt and STRATCOM, the National Guard, reserve components. Some of the dollar figures you're going to see that you see in those different spending flows are going to show up here. So again, the services purchased by Offutt Air Force Base are gonna show up in the information you're looking at here as the contract dollars from Offutt Air Force Base go out to businesses in the state. So for that reason, folks may wonder why, or maybe think that couldn't you do a separate impact analysis of this federal contracting here in the state of Nebraska? In our opinion, that would not probably be appropriate. Because a lot of these contract dollars that you're seeing here have already been picked up in some of the analyses we've already seen previous to this slide. So Just to give you a sense of the different agencies or sub-agencies holding these contracts or awarding these contracts. So essentially what you're looking at is the bottom row there is the Department of Veterans Affairs. There are no sub-agencies listed under the Department of Veterans Affairs. So there's about $107 million of contracts with the VA held by Nebraska businesses, or business where Nebraska is the place of performance. The top rows are all DOD sub-agencies. So the big DOD figure is split into about $900 million, is split into these various sub-agencies, with the Department of the Air Force awarding the largest amount of contracts to Nebraska businesses or Nebraska-based businesses, with $663 million of contracts. The Department of Army is next with about $154 million. Okay, so that just gives you a sense of which sub-agencies are awarding these contracts. Again, not too surprising, the Department of the Air Force is awarding the greatest dollar figures here, given their presence in the state. And finally, just to kind of get an idea of what industries are receiving these contract dollars, the greatest proportion of contract dollars that we see awarded are in the professional, scientific, and technical services industry. And I should point out that the NAICS codes, these are North American Industry Classification System codes. So this is a system that just allows businesses, for whatever services or goods they provide, they're classified with a specific code based on the nature of those goods or services. It is possible for a business to provide services or goods that fall into multiple NAICS codes. The nice thing is in the contract data that we obtained, it does provide the NAICS code for the specific service or good provided. Okay, so again, the professional, scientific, and technical services by a long ways the greatest total dollars obligated, and construction, the next two rows, you can see there's also high levels of spending related to construction and engineering. If you look at those top three rows, or just the top two, you're seeing about 75% of all contracts let to Nebraska businesses were related to professional, scientific, and technical services or some type of construction. Okay, so those are really the drivers of the contracting held here in Nebraska. And we have, I guess I would just mention, we do have, there are other ways to parse the data. If you look at the report, we have several other, we break NAICS codes out by county. So you can look at your own county and see which industries are holding, or businesses in which industries are holding the contracts in your county if you're not in Omaha or Lincoln here. So it's pretty detailed information. We can get even more detailed given the information that was provided to us. But in any event, if you have time to go look at the report, I'd recommend you do that, because there's a lot of interesting information in that section of the report. With that, I will send it back over to Phil.
Thanks, Mitch. And I would just offer that we just put a link to the commission website in the chat to everyone, along with a direct link to the commission report in the chat as well. So thank you for that feedback from the audience. For 2021, the commission continued to put forth 6 recommendations that have their roots in the 2008 BRAC Task Force report. These recommendations include increasing state appropriation to ensure full commitment of federal dollars for National Guard infrastructure needs, supporting local subdivisions in their efforts to improve military installations, ensure governmental entities and developers consider encroachment issues when building near military installations. On the next slide, we'll see additional recommendations, which include that Nebraska colleges and universities should engage in partnerships with the Department of Defense. The report highlights the work of the National Strategic Research Institute at the University of Nebraska, along with the U.S. Strategic Command's Deterrence and Assurance Academic Alliance. The Commission also recommends supporting legislation and regulatory reforms in support of military personnel and families. Of note, this year's report has a section focused on understanding the size of active duty military families in Nebraska. This year's report also has a new section assessing progress toward the Department of Defense's Defense State Liaison Office key issues for 2021. Final recommendation is that the Commission recommends providing tax relief to military personnel to encourage military retirees to live and work in Nebraska. On May 25th of 2021, Governor Ricketts approved Legislative Bill 387, which increased the exemption of military retirement pay from state income taxation. Specifically, Legislative Bill 387 excludes 100% of military retirement benefit income for the taxable years beginning on or after January 1st, 2022. On a final note, please know that the Commission continues to assess results and impact of recent military and veteran-related legislation going back to 2010. And before we move on to questions, I'd really like to just thank Bridget Harris, Nez Vance, and Dr. Eric Thompson, and the entire College of Business for their support with this research and for the production of this webinar. And so with that, I think, Mitch, we can open the floor to questions.
While we are waiting for questions, we'll go ahead and post our contact information if you have any questions for Phil or I. If you'd like to request any additional information about the report or anything we presented here, we'd be happy to take those questions at any time. Feel free to reach out to us. In addition to that, I'd just like to highlight the next webinar in our series, next spring 22 webinar related to the retail capture here in Nebraska. So Dr. Thompson will be presenting some interesting information he puts together with our students here at the BBR. So please tune into that. And finally, there are multiple ways to connect with the BBR through various social media. And there's also a newsletter that you can subscribe to by emailing the email address you see at the bottom of this slide. I think we can wait just one more moment for questions. We haven't seen any come in quite yet.
Sure, Mitch, if I could just take a minute. Sure. You know, we looked at a lot of elements related to military and veterans affairs, and we highlighted the impact of GI Bill spending across the state. And for this audience, they realize the value of their work as advocates for military personnel and veterans, especially the student veteran success centers at the various colleges and universities, not only here at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, but across the state. That's really important to help those veterans make the transition and to help serving military members increase their education and improve, add their value to the Department of Defense. So, and remind me again, Mitch, if someone wants to put a question, they should use the Q&A button. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Or it could probably work in the chat window as well, if there are none. Seeing no further questions, or no questions, I guess I'd just like to thank Phil. He thanked us here at the university, so we'd like to thank Phil, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs for continuing to look to us to help them out on the things they need, the issues they're looking at each year. It's always interesting. First of all, just to look at the numbers that direct spending and generate the economic impact estimate. But in addition to that, diving into those special topics, it's always interesting for us. We always get students involved here at the university, and they always enjoy working on this project. most recent commission meeting, one of our students joined, and she's really excited about the work that she helped produce. So so it's just a good opportunity for us here at the BBR. We get webinars like this out of it too, so we get to present this information to the public. So it's just a really good opportunity, and Phil, we appreciate it. So,
you bet.
All right, and with that, I think we can go ahead and conclude today's webinar. Thanks everybody for your attendance. Have a good day.